Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, brought to us by Nintendo. Link to the Past was the first Zelda game not available on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it became one of the top-selling games ever for the Super Nintendo. Link to the Past was more of a return to the original Legend of Zelda, going back to the top-down perspective instead of the side perspective we saw in Adventure of Link. The game featured not one, but two massive overworlds to explore, tons of hidden secrets, collectibles, as well as many dungeons for Link to battle through. Link to the Past is not only a personal favorite, but is widely considered one of the best games in the Legend of Zelda series. So here we go with The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. When you start the game, you're introduced to one of my favorite title screens of all time, followed by some storyline before we get going with the game. So as you can see from the opening story, the evil Agahnim has kind of taken over Hyrule and kidnapped not only these maidens, but also Princess Zelda, and it's up to Link to save the day. When we get back into our title screen, when you press start, we'll be able to actually select from one of 3 different files, just like the other classic Zelda games. We're going to then, of course, enter our name before we actually begin. After a little bit more story with Zelda telling us to come save her at the castle, Link's uncle bravely goes out the door himself telling you to kind of stay back. But what kind of game would that be? So we jump out of bed, grab the lantern located in the lower right corner of the house, and then run outside. The whole scenes of the lightning and rain effects is just so stunning considering the original Zelda games on the NES. This is a huge leap graphically, sound-wise, and just overall presentation. It's just really kind of cool to take in. When we begin, we're going to work our way up towards the castle, and then up the path on the right side, lifting up this bush, and then dropping down into this hole. We find that our uncle, well, he didn't really make it too far, and after talking to him, we'll be given the sword and shield. Now with our weapons in hand, we can finally actually start doing some damage to objects as well as enemies. Over to the right side, you can actually go over there and get some magic if you want some for your lantern, but we really don't have to use the lantern this early on in the game. There's tons of bushes to destroy, and this is the first time that bushes or any real objects are able to be destroyed by Link in order to get rupees and other items such as heart drops, magic jars, as well as the occasional bee, and yes, an actual bee that you can actually even capture later on, as well as you also can find fairies, who you can also capture. When you get inside Hyrule Castle, we're going to be taking the left path over here. You can go either left or right on the first floor. Both of these will lead to this hallway, which is where we're going, and then down the staircase. I know a lot of people, of course, have played A Link to the Past. It's one of the most played games of all time. I'm just going to do my best to give the hints and showcase some of the cool stuff that you may not know about the game throughout. In this first room, we're going to take out the enemy in order to grab the key. You can also get the map for the dungeon, which I won't be getting most of the maps or the compasses. I'll be focused mainly on just getting through the dungeons quickly and as interestingly as I can. There are going to be some cool tricks that I'm going to do that necessarily aren't the full straight up route you're supposed to take, but I think it'll help make the gameplay a little bit more interesting. Many times, just like with the original Zelda, you're going to have to destroy all the enemies in a current room in order to open up a door. Here, for example, we have to take out the Green Knight and then over into the next room take out the Blue Knight in order to grab not only a key, but also another item, the boomerang. The boomerang works exactly like it did in the original Zelda, being able to throw out and hit enemies in order to stun them, as well as also you can pick up items and bring them back to you. There's going to be a few instances where we actually will use the boomerang to help us out in the run. Now down here is the dungeon itself. Here you're going to have to face this mace guard over to the right side in order to save Zelda. Now there's a couple of different strategies. You can either run in and just straight up attack them, or you can kind of use my strategy here, picking up the jars and using them to your advantage, because it only takes 2 jars in order to take out this guy and you don't even have to get close to him. Once you have the big key, talk to Zelda and she'll explain that we're going to actually have to escape out of the castle itself and head to the sanctuary. Now it's off to the sanctuary itself, which is after the hidden path that Zelda mentioned. In order to get there, we do have to do some backtracking though, so you're going to have to work your way back up onto the main floor and actually head back to the very first room where we enter the castle. Along the way back though, we don't really have to worry about too many enemies, so we're going to be avoiding them. There is actually a little bit of a shortcut that we're going to be taking just briefly in this room. Instead of going back south, which you can still do, we're going to go up these stairs and head around to the right. This will allow us just to kind of skip a little bit of the area, making it a tiny bit easier. You'll probably notice that there's actually different levels in this dungeon, having the top area that I'm standing on now, and I'm able to jump down below. And this will be a common thing, trying to figure out how to get up to certain places or down to certain places throughout the entire game. Now, just kind of for the sake of it, I'm going to go over the right path this time, but like I said before, you can take either the left or right path in order to get to and back from that underground dungeon. Once back into the main room, Zelda will mention the secret passage that you can take to the sanctuary. So head up the staircase and then up immediately the next staircase. Here you can ignore the Blue Knights. You can also have some fun and actually slash at the curtains on the left and right walls, though it doesn't reveal anything hidden. Then you want to push the giant thing back here in order to reveal a hidden door. Now we're in the kind of second part of the first dungeon of the game, and inside here you're going to find a couple of different enemies, including the ropes, as well as these rats. And actually, interestingly enough, the rats are actually called rats, as opposed to so many other enemies in the Zelda universe, like the bats being called Keese, and the mummies known as Gibdo. The rats are actually just rats. Speaking of the rats, it's actually a good idea to fight all the ones you end up running into down here. Not only is taking out some of the other enemies a good idea for some extra rubies as well as you need to find some things, but the rats actually have a high percentage chance of dropping rupees. I guess because they're rats, they go around stealing rupees from all around that they can find. So sometimes you'll get lucky, not only get green and possibly blue rupees, but you can also get red rupees. The green rupees are worth 1, the blues are worth 5, and the red ones are worth 20. There actually is a handful of things that we do need to purchase in the game, as well as a couple other things that we won't be doing, but also cost rupees. This is a relatively straightforward area, and the only kind of deviating I'm doing at all instead of heading right to the door is fighting those rats to try to build up the rupee count so I don't have to collect as many in some of the other areas we're going to be going to. However, there is a couple of really big rupee spots that you can just instantly get a lot of rupees, so I will be showing a couple of them throughout this run. After grabbing the key in that room, of course heading through the door, we now get into a lit area, and you're going to notice to the left some cracked walls. These are actually bombable walls, but unfortunately we don't have bombs yet. You can also charge into them with the Pegasus boots, but we don't have that either, so for now we're just going to have to ignore it. But we will actually be coming back here in a little while. Head up the staircase, and now you'll be in a room filled with rats, so it's a good idea to take all of these out before heading down into the next room. Once down into the next room, you'll have 2 levers, one on the left and one on the right. Interestingly enough, Zelda will say just to pull the switch over there. She's referring to the one on the right, and when you get near it, she'll give you a little tutorial about pulling that switch. Interesting enough though, she doesn't give you the tutorial if you go and try to pull the left one. And if you do that, ropes end up falling from the sky. And I mean the snake enemy, not actual ropes. Either way, enter the door and you will end up in the sanctuary. You're going to get a lot of information, especially telling you about going over to Kakariko Village in order to meet a wise sage, so he can give you more information. By doing so, you will get on your map marked one of the 3 pendants that we're going to be collecting. You don't actually need to go to Kakariko though for that information. You can actually go straight over to the pendant, and that's what we're going to actually be doing. We're going to be beating 2 of the dungeons pretty fast, instead of actually going around and collecting any extra items, at least up to this point. We'll have the green and blue pendants before we actually start doing some collecting, going to Kakariko or anything like that. Follow the path I'm taking, and this will lead you down towards the Eastern Palace, which is located on the far right of your main map. Now at any time you can actually pull up your map if you want to. You have not only a world map, but you also have a map inside of the dungeons, of course. By the Eastern Palace, we're going to be climbing through this area. You have to do a little bit of exploration and trying to find your way over to where you're trying to get to, but nothing too tricky. Some tougher enemies here because you will have to deal with these statues that, when you do get close to them, they will end up coming to life. These Armos are not too terrible though. Climb up the next couple ones and you'll enter the Eastern Palace, the first kind of real full dungeon of the game. When we first enter, you want to hit the button just above you, and then go straight into the next room, taking out a couple enemies as well as hitting another button. You'll notice that there was 2 other doors on the left and right, but the bridges that connect them to the actual palace are broken. Though we'll see later on in the game the contrast between this dungeon and another one that is located in the Dark World. A lot of the things in the game will involve pressing different buttons, and I love that they actually made the buttons look similarly to the actual ground, but they do stand out just a bit so you can tell when something is a possible button. In this room, you'll have to take out all the Stalfos enemies by picking up the pots or just straight up attacking them. Either way, once they're all done, you'll be able to enter into the next room. The Eastern Palace does have a couple of similarities to the first dungeon from the original Legend of Zelda, Eagle. Mainly the color schemes, some of the enemies, and also the item that we're going to be getting from the large chest, or the weapon located in the dungeon, is the same, the bow. Ignore the large chest for now, because we'll have to get the big key, which is something you'll need not only to unlock doors with giant locks on them, but also to open up those chests. In this room, watch out for the bubbles, hit the button, and then immediately backtrack just a few steps to enter the room over to the right. Here, you're going to pick up the pot on the very far upper side of the room, and you'll grab another key, in which case, run around the room, once again trying to do your best to avoid these bubbles chasing you, and go through the door. I always love this perspective of having the different layers, and being able to walk across that bridge and seeing the area we explored earlier down below us. In this room, you'll have to take out all the enemies, including the Igors. The green Igors can be defeated either with your sword or with other items, whereas the red Igors we'll be battling later can only be defeated with the bow and arrows. One of the things we haven't really talked about is, of course, just the overall layout at the top, having the magic meter up into the upper left corner. The item, of course, that you currently have selected next to that, your current rupee count, which you can have up to 999, your bomb count, your arrow count, and then, of course, your keys, followed by hearts. Pretty simple stuff, but I figured I would explain it. When we get back to this room, grab the large chest so that you can get the bow, and if you want to, you can equip it as we're going to be entering into the next part of the dungeon. This is another one of the dark areas of the room, so take out all the normal enemies, including the Igors. The one on the right will drop a key. To the right side is another door you can enter, which will have a bunch of little blue rupees. Definitely a way to get some more rupees, but we don't quite need it since we've done pretty good up to this point collecting some. Collect the items here so that you can actually build up your arrow count, and then enter the next room. You're then going to have back-to-back rooms with buttons you'll have to press with a bunch of fake buttons as well. The bottom one in that room, and then the top upper left one in this room. Take out the red Igor as well as both of the Stalfos so that you can actually open up the door above. The last room before the boss contains 2 red Igors as well as a bunch of little other enemies. You can replenish plenty of your arrows if you don't have enough, and then take out both of the Igors. Make sure that you have enough arrows because they can definitely be useful taking out the upcoming boss. The first real boss of the game is the Armos Knights. These 6 knights will start bouncing around the room after a few seconds, and you want to use your arrows to take them out. I recommend spreading around your arrow shots, because when you get down to only one of them left, he'll turn red and start jumping towards you, and if you've already have some damage on him, it can make this part a lot easier. They move in a particular pattern, and they keep repeating the pattern over and over until they're all defeated. Once you've delivered the last blow to the final armor Stalfos, you get the Pendant of Courage, and we can continue on in the game. Now that we have the Pendant of Courage, we're going to go see another sage, which we could have also talked to earlier on as well. However, he would have just given us more information about the Eastern Palace. Located over here, when you talk to him now, he'll give you some more information, as well as the key item known as the Pegasus boots. The Pegasus boots allow you to dash in any direction. Holding in the A button, you'll be able to charge forward into things. For example, I can charge into this wall right above me, in which case I can grab myself some extra items, including bombs for the first time. Be sure to grab the other 2 chests as well in order to fill up that rupee count. Of course, this is before the days of the purple rupee, which represented, of course, 50 rupees. It's now time to start heading towards the Desert Palace, the second palace of the game, in which case we can get the next pendant. In order to do so, though, we will have to make a stop in order to get a certain book that will translate a passage outside of the dungeon, allowing us to go inside. One of the good things about the game is, just like the original Zelda, there are some other things you can do at any time. There's also mini games included in Link to the Past that you can go to Kakariko Village and other parts of the game. Some of these, including the digging game as well as the treasure chest game, we will be completing in order to get heart pieces. While they would actually become a staple of the series, this is the first time, of course, we're seeing any type of minigame. One of the big collectibles in the game, of course, is the heart pieces. Now, we already got one giant heart for when we got to the Sanctuary, and we get giant hearts for defeating all the bosses in the game. However, you also have to find heart pieces scattered all throughout the game. There's a total of 24 different heart pieces in order to completely fill your heart meter. Of course, during the course of this run, I will be collecting all the heart pieces, though probably not in the most efficient manner at times, because it can get a little bit confusing trying to remember where every one of them is located. In the library itself, we charge into the bookcase in order to get the Book of Midori. This, of course, allows us to translate the tablet inside the Desert Palace area. Now, to get there, we're going to be doing a tiny bit of backtracking. You can actually get there a little bit quicker if you have the Power Glove, but we don't get that until we actually go into the Desert Palace. The Power Glove allows us to lift large rocks. Right south of Link's house, you'll be going through a swamp-like area. Now, we're going to be passing a thing over to the left here, but we're not going to actually be exploring into that yet. In the Dark World, this is actually the location of technically the second dungeon of the Dark World, but I'm going to be beating the dungeons in a little bit unorthodox manner. Once we've made it into the desert, be careful while dashing around because you can actually run into the cactuses. You'll also have to deal with the mud guys and the vultures that are going to be coming at you. Once you get up to this tablet, you want to equip the Book of Midori and use it, and you'll be able to actually unlock the palace. That's always been one of my favorite scenes in this game, just the whole thing of the way the sound effects go and Link doing the animation, and then of course the actual palace opening up. Now, the Desert Palace is actually a relatively small palace or dungeon to explore through, and we'll be taking a relatively direct route. The room I'm entering here, you don't technically need to enter, this is the location of the map, but I figured just for the heck of it, I'm going to end up doing it. Here, what you're going to have to do is hit this button, you'll unlock a treasure chest, in which case it has the map. Our goal is to get the large key, but we're going to need a regular key in order to do that first. Up here, we're going to go over to the left and enter into this room. You'll see a key sitting on top of one of the big torches, which you can run into, just like we did to get the Book of Midori itself, and then we can just quickly exit out of the room. Now that we have that, you want to dash yourself all the way across the entire length of the dungeon on the top portion. Ignore the room up above us because it just contains an empty room that you'll have to fight some enemies to get out of as the door will close behind you. Use the key and enter in this room and take out all the little enemies. You can grab the compass from the treasure chest if you want to, and then enter inside the door. Dash upwards, but be careful of the cannons firing cannonballs at you from the left and right sides. Inside the chest at the very top, though, will be the big key. Now, once we have the big key, we're going to be dashing all the way back across the dungeon to the opposite side. However, we'll take a little bit of a different route to get there. Instead of going back up and around, we're just going to go through this area, which actually may end up taking longer because we can't dash quite as far, but it shows a little bit more of the dungeon. Now here we're going to be entering the door right to the left. Unfortunately, I made a little mistake and had to do a quick turnaround, but inside here we'll be able to go through the door above us once we unlock it by hitting the switch underneath this pot, in which case it contains the large treasure chest. Here we get the Power Glove, and it's so bad. This allows us to end up lifting rocks in different areas of the game to help us make it through some different paths, including unlocking the second half of the Desert Palace. Now we're going to be heading all the way down here and enter this door over to the left, which actually will take us out of the palace. If you want to push one of the blocks and open up the door above you, you'll find a small fairy fountain, which will end up replenishing your hearts. Now right below where we are is actually one of the small heart containers. Unfortunately, I make my biggest mistake in the entire game by not going and grabbing it now, so I'll have to come back later and grab it later. In this room, break the pot open to the left side and you'll grab a small key, allowing us to immediately exit the room. This is the first instance, though, of flying floor panels. There's a few rooms that you'll actually have to wait for all the panels to fly at you before you'll actually be able to continue to the next room. Thankfully for that one, though, we don't have to worry. In this room, there's a lot of small torches, and your instinct may actually be to light all the torches, but thankfully, you don't have to worry about that. Instead, you just want to pick up the key from this pot, and then open up the door at the very top. Here, you'll have another room with flying floor panels, but there's another key in the upper right this time, taking us to the next room. Here, you will have to light the torches as well as take out the red Igor. Well, I guess you don't have to take them out, but it makes things a lot easier. Then equip the torch and use it to light all 4 torches. By doing so, the wall itself will actually move, revealing a large lock on the door above us, and now we actually get to fight the next boss. The second boss of the game, Lanmolas, actually comes in 3. There's a couple of different strategies to use on Lanmolas. You can actually just attack straight up with the sword, you can use your bow and arrow, or you can actually use the ice rod, which we haven't gotten yet, but is also a pretty effective way if you're able to actually land contact with them. Either way, when they bust out of the ground, they will actually cause a 4-shot spread shot to go out into the 4 corners. However, once there's only one Lanmola left, he fires out a whole circle of rocks that you're going to have to dodge. Once you deliver the last blow, you'll get another heart, as well as the next pendant. Our next pendant is located all the way on the very top of Death Mountain. However, we have a few different things we're going to be doing before we head up to Death Mountain. We're going to stop by this little cave over to the right inside the desert in order to grab a small piece of heart. Now this ends up being the first heart that we ended up gathering in this, but like I said, the first one that normally I would grab is the one located in the Desert Palace that I forgot to do. Once you collect 4 small pieces of heart, you will end up getting a full heart added to your life meter. This of course became a staple of the Legend of Zelda series. Of course, you always want to be careful trying to dash. There's bombs on the ground as you can see, as well as there's cactuses. The water around this area right here actually contains a small heart piece, but since we have to drain that whole thing later in order to enter the Swamp Palace in the Dark World, we're just going to hold off and do it then. Over here to the far right is an area that we can explore in order to get the ice rod. Just be careful while dashing around like normal because the buzz blobs are pretty prevalent here. The buzz blobs are those green blobs that move back and forth, and if you run into them, will end up electrocuting you. It's always interesting with the buzz blobs because they actually always look like a future Legend of Zelda enemy, the Choo-Choos, though apparently they are 2 separate enemies. Maybe they're just located in different regions of the world. Now located inside this cave is the ice rod itself. Now, the ice rod isn't really needed until near the end of the game. Actually, one of the final bosses of the game requires the ice rod to be used. However, it's just easier to grab it now, and it can be used to help you out against some of the other enemies in the game. Using it will freeze most enemies in place, allowing you to either get by them or do a decent amount of damage to them. Now that we have the ice rod, we're going to actually head to Kakariko Village for the first time in this run. One of the things I always liked also about Link to the Past was its Japanese name. Of course, it was no surprise that they had to change it when bringing it over to North America, but it actually was called in Japan Legend of Zelda Triforce of the Gods, or the Japanese word's equivalent to that. I always thought that was just kind of a really cool name of having it as the Triforce of the Gods, as that's the main focus of the game really ends up being finding the Triforce itself. Another thing that always kind of confused me to a degree was the name of the game being A Link to the Past. Now, in the end, this refers to, I'm pretty sure, to a couple of things, whether or not the fact you're talking about the imprisoning war at the beginning of the game, or also that this is actually taking place prior to the first two Legend of Zelda games. Now, in Kakariko Village, we're going to be stopping by this house, going into the back entrance of it in order to find the bottle. Now, there's 4 bottles to collect in the game, which case you can hold a variety of items, including bees, fairies, as well as different potions. Stopping by the house just north of this is this little kid that is currently sick, and because he's sick, he can't go around catching bugs. So he gives you his bug catching net, which can be used to catch fairies or bees to put in the bottles. Another really cool, interesting thing you can do with the bug catching net is actually deflect the abilities of a boss later on. Now, we'll be doing that in this run, and I'll showcase it once we get there. Right over here, there's a guy sitting on a carpet, and if you talk to him, he will sell you another bottle. Up in the upper left corner of Kakariko Village is a little cliff that you can jump off and go into a secret entrance inside this cave. You can collect some extra rupees by picking up the pots or going through the chest, as well as you can pick up some bombs from this one down here, bomb the wall just above you, and go inside, and you'll be collecting another piece of heart. Now, before heading to Death Mountain, we are going to make a couple of other small stops, mainly actually to collect rupees. Along the way, we're also going to be able to gather another piece of heart. Over here, if you head over to the right, you'll actually be on the same screen with the sanctuary. There's this large pile of rocks, and if you do a running charge into it, you'll destroy them, revealing a staircase. Inside the staircase will be the next piece. From here, we're going to actually head over to the right and head to the graveyard. There's actually 2 cool things in the graveyard. One is in one of the tombstones to the upper right, which is a secret item that we won't be able to get quite yet, as well as one over to the left, which actually takes you into a secret entrance back into Hyrule Palace's dungeon. Remember this room from earlier on? I mentioned we'd be coming back? Well, now we can actually go ahead and destroy this wall. I'm going to use a bomb. Like I said, you can also just straight up charge into it. Enter inside and then pick up some extra items from the chest, including an awesome 300 rupee chest located in the middle. You'll see from the other chests are just some extra hearts in case you do need them. Then you just have to kind of do a little bit of backtracking by traveling through the last couple of rooms of this dungeon and back out of the sanctuary. A couple of things I won't be really doing in the game, but I should probably mention, is there is a kid located in Kakariko Village that runs away from you when you get close to him. The thing about it is, you actually can catch him by using the Pegasus boots, though he only gives you a little bit of dialogue and no extra items for doing so. There's also a couple of secret fountains in the game, 2 of which that we'll be exploring that allow us to upgrade certain items we have in our inventory, while another one you can actually throw in rupees in order to get bomb or arrow upgrades. Now, I won't be actually doing that in the run because actually I've always found having 10 bombs and 30 arrows is plenty in order to complete the game. Now up here, we have to lift up this large rock and we enter inside Death Mountain. Now to get onto the mountain itself, we're going to have to explore a dark cave, and along the way we're going to actually run into an old man. The old man will actually walk with us and we'll have to guide him onto the mountain itself and back to the cave that he stays in. My favorite thing about having the old man with you though is when you try to use the Pegasus boots, you'll actually run really slowly. Just the animation being slowed down to the fact that you have the elderly man with you is just funny enough to actually do it. Over here, you'll have to go down south, which he does actually let you know which path to take, as the upper path just ends up leading to a dead end. Once down here though, you'll actually enter outside and be on the mountain. Here you're going to be introduced to one of my least favorite enemies in the entire game. These guys are extremely obnoxious and you're going to be seeing a crap ton of them. The dead rocks, when you hit them, they end up freezing and turning into stone, which is a good thing for the few seconds, but they also block your path on a couple of different occasions depending upon where you hit them. Delivering the old man back to his home though, he gives you the magic mirror. This allows you to actually travel back and forth between the light and dark worlds, which we'll actually be doing for the first time in just a few moments. Now you actually can defeat the dead rocks, though you have to use the magic powder or use the quake medallion in order to turn them into slimes in order to take them out. Over here, you'll hit this warp and it will actually take you to the Dark World, introducing us to one of my favorite things about the game, Bunny Link. Yep, Pink Bunny Link. You'll also notice that there's two other guys hanging around here too, the bully as well as the guy he's bullying. Now, basically, when you go to the Dark World, you become corrupt and change into a different form. However, having a certain item that we're going to be grabbing in the next dungeon here allows us to stay our normal form. Go down the staircase to the left and use your boomerang or hit the switches in order to grab the key and then head back up the stairs. This is the first palace that introduces these switches, and these are going to become a common theme throughout the rest of the game. They have either the orange or blue, and when they are those colors, that means of course those switches are currently down. In the upper left corner of the room, you'll have to use that key that we just gathered in order to open up the door. Inside here, you'll have to avoid a whole bunch of the flying tiles. This is an instance where you have to wait till all the flying tiles come at you before you're going to be able to move on to the next room. Now, in some of the rooms in the game that you'll have to wait for these, you can actually wait in the doorway, and all the tiles flying at you won't be able to hit you. They'll actually break before they enter into the door itself. However, we can't do that here because even if we get near the staircase, they'll still be able to hit us and possibly actually knock us back up the stairs, in which case we'll have to repeat the entire room. So it's best not to try to do that. Here, you'll be able to hit the switch, open it up, and then go down to the next room. In this room, you'll have to light the 4 torches in order to reveal a chest, which will give us the big key. We're introduced to a few new enemies in this dungeon, including the mini Mordorms, which we'll be seeing in the room just above us. Now, this is kind of a preview for the boss, except for these guys you can actually hit them anywhere instead of just hitting them in the tail. Now, I actually make a mistake here and end up not hitting the switch again, so I'll have to come right back down the stairs in a second. Another interesting enemy here is the Kadongos, which is that red rhino looking enemy there. They end up spitting fire at you every few seconds. Now these guys can thankfully be destroyed by just attacking them, unlike their kind of counterpart from the other Zelda game, the original Legend of Zelda, the Dodongo. Now I'm sure in some way, shape, or form they are related, though it's not officially announced. The thing that's interesting though about the whole thing is the Kadongos spit fire, whereas in the original Legend of Zelda, the Dodongos did not spit fire. Though, from here on out, Dodongos would then spit fire, first introduced in Ocarina of Time. Another enemy introduced is the hard hat beetles. These guys come in blue and orange varieties as well. The blue ones can easily be defeated. The orange ones, however, not so much, usually having to knock them into pits if you're going to want to get rid of those guys. The blue ones, though, you can also knock into pits as they bounce all around, but they also bounce you when you do hit them, in which case you can accidentally fall down into the pits. On this floor is actually the location for the large chest, but we won't be able to grab it quite yet. Instead, we're going to be heading over to the left side, watching out for the Kadongos, and then heading up another staircase. Once you are up here, hit the star pad in order to change the locations of the holes, and then go into the upper part of this hole here. You can go into the southern part of it, but if you do, you'll end up hitting the star switch when you land and switch the hole so that you won't be able to grab the chest. Now that we have the Moon Pearl item, which is the item that allows us to stay as our human normal form, even when we travel to the Dark World. Nothing's quite as frustrating as when you actually make it to the Dark World later on and you realize you have forgotten the Moon Pearl. Climb up this staircase, and now it's time to battle Mordorum. This boss, like I said before, you have to hit him in the tail, and when you do of course damage to him, in which case he retreats and then starts coming at you again. If you hit him in the head, you'll end up bouncing off of him, in which case you may end up falling down to the pit below, in which case you'll have to climb back up and the entire battle resets. This is one of the only battles that is like this in the game, so it's very frustrating if you get knocked down, because like I said, his whole health regenerates. When he gets down to his last hit, he will speed up and go double speed, so you'll have to be careful, deliver that last blow, and then grab the pendant. It's now time to go get ourselves the Master Sword. Once exiting out of the Tower of Hera, which has always been one of my favorite names of a dungeon, when you make it back over here, do a big leap off the edge here, because thankfully there's no fall damage in Link to the Past, and then enter into this cave, which will allow us to actually exit out of Death Mountain. Just be careful of the pits, and when you make it into this room, you can actually do a big charge all the way down, but if you're not careful and don't stop the charge ahead of time, you'll end up bouncing off the wall and land directly in a pit and have to do the room again. Jump off the mountain itself and then head north. You'll see two lumberjacks cutting down a tree. Remember this for later, because when we return after going to the Dark World for the first full time in the game, that tree will actually be cut and we can actually break it down to get a heart piece. Inside the Lost Woods, we're going to be traveling through and grab this mushroom along the way. The mushroom will allow us to make the magic powder. In order to make that, we'll have to talk to a witch, which is located to the right, and we'll be doing it actually after we can get the Master Sword itself. Over here to the left is the Master Sword Grove, in which case, go up to the top and pull the sword, in one of the best scenes in the game. There's just something so iconic about watching Link pull the Master Sword out, kind of like King Arthur and Sword in the Stone, but it's just so much cooler when you got to see the scene and the whole screen lights up and the entire Lost Woods now is not filled with fog and you can see it so much clearer. The awesome effects of the layering of the shadows with all the trees just brings out this area so much better and is one of the cooler parts. Down here, you want to cut down the bushes, and the center bush reveals a hole. Dropping down will allow us to grab another piece of heart. Now, according to the guy from the Sanctuary, soldiers have come and kidnapped Zelda. Now, you can actually go to the Sanctuary and watch the death scene of the guy, or you can just leave him there. You don't actually technically have to visit him. Though I've always wondered, if you wait till the very end of the game and then travel there, is he still actually disappeared? I've never actually checked that. Either way, we're actually going to be bypassing the Sanctuary, so hi dead body, and we're going to be going actually over to Zora Falls in order to get the flippers. And while we can stand in shallow puddles of water that we have earlier on, you can't swim in the deep puddles until you get the flippers, which end up costing 500 rupees, which is why it was so key that we grabbed rupees throughout, as that is easily the most expensive item that we're going to be purchasing in this game. You also don't really need the flippers for most of the game, except when you make it to the second palace in the Dark World. and since you can actually beat that palace later on, you don't technically need the flippers for a long time. Drop the mushroom off to the witch located at the giant pot of brew, and then continue over to the right, watching out for some more buzz blobs along the way as we head up towards the falls. The Zora Falls location always took me a long time to actually find where it was located, and I always remember dreading trying to actually build up that rupee count until eventually I found out the locations of a few of those big rupee pots. When you make it into Zora's Falls itself, walk along the shallow water. It's a pretty straightforward path until you make it to near the end of it here, in which case head all the way south and take the bottom path in order to work around, and you'll end up meeting the Queen Zora, which will end up giving you the flippers. With the flippers, we can now swim in the deep water, jump off the waterfall down here, and then dash all the way down. Before heading over to the left though, we want to climb up here first and grab another piece of heart. The Zora enemies that you've been seeing throughout here are actually interesting that they can pop out of either shallow or deep water, but if they're in the deep water, they stay in there and fire fireballs at you, and if they pop out of the shallow, they'll actually land on the ground and start walking around. When we exit out of the falls area, head over to the left and swim into this area and go inside the waterfall itself. Here is the location of the first mystery pond of the game. Here you can throw in items, and as long as you say that you did throw that item in, you'll get a better item. The two items that you can throw in here are the shield, in order to get instantly the automatic second shield, which you can also purchase for a large amount of money in the game, so it's much easier just to get it here. You can also throw in the boomerang in order to get the magical or red boomerang. Now there's also two locations that you can actually get the magic boomerang as well. The other location is actually in Kakariko Village. If you bomb an area down below, there's a building, and if you go inside, you'll be able to get the magic boomerang there. The magical boomerang upgraded allows you to, of course, throw it farther, just like the upgraded boomerang did in the original Legend of Zelda. Now it's time to head back to Hyrule Castle and confront Agahnim, who has kidnapped Princess Zelda. When you make it back to where the witch was located, head inside the actual potion shop, and inside will actually be the magic powder that we had her make from the mushroom we gave her. The magic powder can be used actually for a few things. It'll be actually used to get a better magic meter. You can also use it on many different enemies, including the dead rocks and the buzz blobs, allowing you to actually take those enemies out without being electrocuted from the buzz blobs or turning the dead rocks into stone anymore. Thankfully from where we are, and overall the map's not too huge that it gets overwhelming trying to do a lot of backtracking through areas. We can go over here, lift up this rock since we have the power glove, and now we can get easily back to Hyrule Castle. Now you may be wondering, since we already completed Hyrule Castle earlier, where exactly are we going? Well, there's actually an alternate path that we didn't take that leads to another part of the castle, which works as a completely different dungeon. You can actually see the eyeball right outside of it above the entrance to the main castle. Once inside here, we're going to go to the left side and head up this staircase and just walk right out here. Over here to the right, you'll see this electrified fence, but when you attack it, you're able to destroy it. You can't do this until you actually have the Master Sword. Now this is a relatively straightforward dungeon. You're not looking for the big key or anything like that. You're pretty much just going straight from room to room. Some rooms you'll have to defeat all the enemies in order to open the door, or defeat a certain enemy in order to get the key. There's also some new enemy types, such as the more advanced soldier enemies that actually only appear inside of this dungeon. And there's quite a few of them in here. You're gonna deal with the advanced ball and chain trooper guys, you'll have the spear guys introduced, the bow soldiers, and a few others. Up here on the 3rd floor, take out the guys if you need to, and then just go into the next room over. Here you're going to have to work your way around the path in order to get to the key that's located on the left side, and then work your way to the lower right so you can actually make it to the next door. You'll have to travel upwards a little bit, and then down in order to get there. Something cool that you've already noticed with the Master Sword is, of course, that you can fire out the beam. This was available also in the original Legend of Zelda just from the very get-go. And just like the original, you can only fire out that beam once you have full health. As soon as you take just one little bit of damage, you won't be able to fire the beam out anymore. Here, be careful not to fall down into the pits, as your sight, of course, is very limited. And here, take out the bow guy just to the south of the door in order to get to the key. There's a couple other enemies here, but only that one is the one that will drop the key. Thankfully, once you make it to the 5th floor, the lights do come back on so we can actually see again, and here you will have to defeat both of the spear soldiers. These guys try to back away from you, but if you get them close to a wall, you can just keep attacking them over and over. In the next room, I'm going to use the boomerang to help me out just a little bit. I'm going to use the pots at first to take out the spear guy, and then use the boomerang to grab the key. Once you have the key, just run over to the right and you can ignore the other spear soldier here. Next room, bunch of guys, but just run past them and up the stairs. Here you're going to have to push a statue out of the way, avoiding fire from the bow guys, and then in here you'll have a slightly smaller path to walk along while trying to avoid the enemies. Then it's time to get ready for the boss area. Enter the next room, you'll have a cutscene with the evil wizard Agahnim. Once Agahnim has sent Princess Zelda over to the Dark World, then you can go up to the top and slice open the curtain to reveal a hidden door, and now begins the battle with Agahnim. Now this is the first instance of doing a volleying attack to hurt a boss, where you'll have to knock back Agnim's blast in order to actually hit him and do damage. You can either use the sword, or just for the fun sake of it, I'm using the bug catching net, which the timing on is a slight bit different than the sword, but still relatively easy to pull off, and just makes things a little funny that you're using a bug catching net in order to blast back these terrible big blasts from this boss. When Agahnim goes into the top center of the screen and doesn't change directions when looking at you, you'll know every time that he's going to be doing his big lightning move that takes up most of that part of the screen. Other than that, he'll fire out his blue blast as well as his main blast. The blue one will break apart, but you can actually use the bug catching net and it helps you out a little bit more, as it actually destroys the blue blast a lot easier. Once you deliver the final blow to Agahnim, it's time to travel to the Dark World. Once in the Dark World and you get control of Link, we're going to start heading down the giant pyramid. Make a pit stop over to the right side area and run along here in order to grab another piece of heart. Our first goal in the Dark World is actually to go to the Dark Palace, the first palace of the Dark World. I know, right? A lot of darkness going on here. But the Palace of Darkness is where exactly the Eastern Palace was in the Light World, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. Once over here, instead of like the weird ruins type thing, it's kind of a giant hedge maze that you're going to have to work your way through. You can see the openings, and you can also see through the top of the hedge maze, little tiny dots allow you to kind of see Link through it and allow you to have a better idea of where you're walking. Go through here and then through the main part of the hedge maze, and when you do this and come out, you'll end up meeting a monkey. Kiki the monkey ends up allowing you to pay him $10 in order to stay with you, and you need Kiki in order to open up the Palace of Darkness, which is going to end up costing you 100 rupees. So you make sure you have 110 rupees before trying to enter the Palace of Darkness. Kiki will then jump up to the top of the Palace of Darkness and open it up by pressing the large button. The first room of the Palace of Darkness actually looks exactly like it did in the Eastern Palace. The only difference is the rooms on the left and right actually have rooms attached now. Head to the left room and head down the staircase. In the lower left corner, lift up the skull and hit the button in order to reveal a treasure chest containing the first key that we need inside the dungeon. Now that we're in the Dark World, the palaces here are a lot more elaborate. There's a lot of different branching paths, and the keys become ever more important, meaning that you need to really kind of keep track of how many you have. While there was a little bit of that in the Light World palaces, they're nothing like they are here. And I will be taking sometimes unorthodox methods in order to get through the dungeons. And the real reason for that is because, like I've said earlier on, a lot of people have played the game. So I just want to try to provide at least somewhat different perspective on some of these. Here, we're going to push this block over to the right side and go straight up and grab the key from the treasure chest. Now head over to the left side and you can see a bombable path. So drop a bomb on it, and then fall down to the floor down below. Once you land here, head up to the top part, you'll see a locked door, of course. This locked door will lead up to a staircase with a treasure chest, and that contains the big key for this palace. With that in our possession, now just jump off the side and you're going to land in the same floor and same room that we had just previously, but over here we can hit another button and grab ourselves another small key. Watch out for the Stalfos. These yellow ones actually throw their heads at you, as well as the terrapins that are just kind of walking around, which we have to use a hammer in order to kind of destroy. Go up the staircase and you'll actually be on the right room of that first set of 3 rooms at the beginning of the palace, in which case then we go up to the main kind of hub room, I like to call it. From here, we're going to go back to that room where we grabbed the key earlier. Jump over across the gap and then head all the way over to the left, watching out for the beetle. You'll be able to use the last key that we currently have in order to open it up. Now you want to dash all the way across to the opposite side. Now there's actually a trick you can do here, which I'm not doing just so I can showcase where the next key is, and you can actually bomb yourself in the right timing across over to the left side to the treasure chest. I'm not sure if you can actually do this in the North American version or only the Japanese version, and that trick's usually used especially in speedruns, and while I will be doing a couple of fun speedrun things in the game, that's one I usually don't attempt. Down here you want to open up this chest to grab another small key, and then on the left side you'll find a chest with an arrow in it, just a singular arrow, and then you can collect a whole bunch of blue rupees along the way. Might as well collect them, but thankfully we don't need too many rupees left in the game. You'll head up the stairs and you'll be back in this room. Ignore the door down below, we don't need to go through there. Instead, use the key that we had just gotten to the left side. This will take you to our dark room that you'll have to work your way through, eventually finding a bombable wall that we can destroy and get to the magical treasure chest. The left side of the room does contain bombs if you do need them, so even if you had none going into the room, you'll still have at least a few in order to open up that wall. There's plenty of the Kadongos in here shooting their fireballs, and thankfully even in the darkness, you can see those fireballs coming your way. Grab another small key from the treasure chest in the lower right corner, then blow open the wall. Open up the large chest and you're going to find the magic hammer. The hammer can actually be used for a variety of things, helping us with certain enemies such as the terrapins, but it also allows us to open up paths. You'll hit these enemies called moles, which don't hurt you, but you can't walk past without hitting them. It's also interesting to note that the hammer is known as the MC Hammer in Japan. Yep, named after the rapper MC Hammer. I use the magic mirror to retract myself all the way back to the beginning of the dungeon, and the reason for doing this is this allows me to get back to this room a little bit quicker than doing some more backtracking. The mirror can be used in any of the major dungeons in order to do so. Then we're going to fire an arrow in order to lower this set of bricks. It can be tough sometimes to line that arrow shot up in order to hit it, and I don't think they meant for it to be able to be done, but it does work, and with so we can actually get over to this right room easier instead of having to do a bunch of backtracking around the room. In this room, open up the right side of skulls in order to find the button, and then push the top right statue onto that button. In the next room, you're introduced to the Gorias. Remember these guys from the original Legend of Zelda? Well, these guys are back and look a little bit different to me. I don't really like the design of the Gorias in this one. I prefer their other form that was in the other games. The green Gorias and the red Gorias are slightly different, with the red ones firing fireballs directly at you when they see you, and the green ones kind of just following you around, mimicking your motions like you saw. There's a few puzzles in the game where you're going to have to take out the red ones with the arrows, while they're sometimes behind walls, so it's kind of a cool little thing. In the next room, you want to shoot the statue right in the eye with a big arrow, and then head down the staircase where you're going to be greeted with those mole enemies. Like I said, they don't hurt you. They're really strange looking overall, but they end up being able to get past with a nice hammer shot directly to their face. Use the key on that left room and then walk through the hallway to this one where you will have to take out all the terrapins by flipping them over. You can either hit them over with the hammer and then attack them twice with your Master Sword, or just use the hammer again on them to instantly defeat them. After defeating all the terrapins in the room, you will open up the door to the right. Here, you'll just have to push the block out of the way in order to use the warp, which is going to put you on a direct path right to the boss room. You'll have a couple of more of the turtles in your way, but then you can open up the door and it's time to battle one of my favorite bosses in the game, the Helmasaur King. This giant beast wears a mask that you have to destroy either with bombs or by using the hammer. You can see when you hit it the first time it ends up cracking, and you keep hitting it, it starts cracking more until it falls off. Once it falls off, you have to attack directly the jewel on the front of the Helmasaur King's head. He gets a lot faster once you do this, and you can either attack him directly with the sword, or you can use your bow and arrow. Either way, once you've delivered enough blows to the Helmasaur King, he will go down, you'll have another heart, and you're going to get the first crystal of the Dark World. Once you complete the first palace of the Dark World kind of opens up to you. With the magic hammer, you're going to be able to explore a lot more of the map than you could when you first got here. You also, if you look at your main map, have the locations of all the other crystals on the world map, and now we have to collect 6 more of them. Normally, your second dungeon would be the Swamp Palace, however, I'm going to be doing things in a different order. I actually prefer going over to what used to be Kakariko Village, or what is the equivalent of that here in the Dark World, and completing the Thieves Town dungeon next, which is actually the 4th dungeon of the Dark World. Once over here, see, we can now use the hammer in order to break down these pegs in order to get over. Now, over where Link's house was located in the Light World is now actually a bomb shop, and you can purchase bombs from there at any time. Later on in the game, once you complete a certain amount of dungeons, you can buy the giant bomb, which is actually used to open up one of the cracks in the walls on the giant pyramid where we first started in the Dark World. Over here to the right, you don't need to come here, and I won't need the rupees really, but I want to showcase it because it's a great way to get easy rupees, as you get 300 from the guy inside here. Now when we head over to the left here, we can lift up this giant rock as kind of a shortcut in order to get closer to where the village is. Before heading to the village, we're going to make a pit stop in this grove up here. Here you're going to meet a person that's been transformed by the Dark World, and after talking to him, he will actually give you the shovel. He then tells you also the location of his magic flute. So what you'll need to do is, once you have the shovel in your possession, use the mirror in order to travel to the Light World. And then you're going to want to dig up the spot of flowers that I am going to in order to find the flute. The flute not only plays a nice little song, you can also use it in order to summon the duck from the Kakariko Village, which allows you to teleport all around the Light World, allowing us a lot quicker and easier access to certain areas, including access straight to dungeons in the Dark World. While you don't need to, I always find it a nice little scene to play the flute one last time for the guy in the grove. He ends up transforming into a weird tree-like creature, and then we're able to continue on. Of note, the Flute Boy, of course, being transformed when being brought over to the Dark World, has a father located in Kakariko Village who sleeps by the bar, and you can actually wake him up with the flute. Now, our next goal is to get the digging game done. Now, what the digging game is, well, you dig in a giant field until you find whatever you want to, including a heart piece. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to actually skip ahead a little bit till after I find it. It's basically at any random spot located here. Sometimes it can take one try, sometimes it can take a lot. And at just the last second, I was able to find the heart piece, and now I'm able to move on, thankfully. Like I said, that is definitely one of the most annoying heart pieces in the game, and can sometimes take upwards of 30, 40, or even an hour in order to finally locate it. Now we're going to use the mirror and switch over to the Light World and head actually back into Kakariko Village. Once we are back inside the town, we're going to head up to what looks like the Weather Vane statue, and if you play the flute in front of it, you'll summon the duck. The duck will then fly off, and then anytime you play the flute afterwards, the duck will show up, pick you up, and you can go to one of set different locations. Now we're going to head back just a little bit back to this area and grab a heart piece that you could have gotten earlier on, but it's just easier to grab it now when we come back here. Go inside this house and then bomb the left wall. It actually is in the same location as the digging game, but it's a slightly different game. It's a maze game where you have to make it through within a certain amount of time in order to earn the heart piece. Thankfully, 15 seconds is plenty, as we're going to charge on through for the first set, work our way up here. We can lift the rock now that we have the power glove, then charge through the top portion of it in order to easily get to the heart piece. After grabbing the heart piece, we're going to travel now back to the Dark World briefly and head back over to the right a screen or two in order to get a heart piece that I should have gotten on the way here, but I forgot that it was actually down here until now. Here, use the mirror inside this ring of flowers, and you'll be in an area you couldn't access normally while in the light world. You'll head inside this little cave area, pick up a couple pots, and grab another heart piece. After grabbing that heart piece, we're going to be using the flute in order to teleport for the first time, and we're going to be heading right back to Kakariko Village. That's one of the big benefits, of course, of getting the duck pretty early on, is that you can get through and back to areas rather fast. Now we're going to head inside this room inside of the village and then head down the stairs. We could have come here technically earlier, but once again, it's one of those things where some of these things you can choose whenever you actually want to go and grab them. We're going to use the bomb on this wall and then throw some pots around in order to get to the heart chest located at the top of the screen. Once you have that, just head right back outside of this area. You can grab some extra rupees by pushing around the blocks in the right order in order to get to those chests, but it's not necessary right now. Now, to get back to the Dark World rather easily in Kakariko, what we have to do is go into the Lost Woods for a brief period of time. Once back into the Lost Woods, just charge over to the right, and then back down. In order to get to this area, normally you would have to lift one of the heavier rocks that you need the big Titan mitt for. But since we don't have that yet, we can just use the hammer and the power glove in order to still teleport. Once here, you want to now charge over to the left through this little pathway and go back down into the evil dark monster village down below. Now we're going to do the treasure chest game, which thankfully is not as hard, in my opinion, as the shovel game, because you only get to choose 2 chests, yes, but I seem to find it rather easily. Usually I'll just start picking 2 chests right at the top, and then I'll exit out and come back in and do it again. Unfortunately, you can't play right away again. I always wish you could, though. So now we're just going to choose 2 more random chests over to it, and thankfully, not only do I get 100 rupees, but I'm able to find the heart piece. Now we're going to go over to the right, and there's this big demon statue that you can pull the door off of the gate in front of it and enter inside in order to find the Thief's Dungeon. Now this is technically the 4th level of the Dark World, but Thieves Town is a relatively simple dungeon once you know where you're going. Follow the path that I'm taking around these rooms and you can easily get to the big key really fast. Now, after we have that large key, we're going to head up this staircase when we get back to this room and go through the big locked door. You'll see a locked door to your left, but just charge up to the top, grab a key from a skull, and then head right back down and enter into that locked door. There's a bunch of new enemies located inside here, and you've already noticed the Zuzaks, the blue and red ones. These dragon-like creatures are some of my favorites in the game. They fire out fireballs from the mouth. The red ones are definitely more of a pain with those fireballs. The blue ones are just kind of like wandering around. And then you also have another enemy that gets on my nerves a bit, the Gibbos, but they only appear really kind of in a few rooms, and they can hit you both with their gassy body as well as their red core, and you actually have to attack the red core in order to defeat them. Usually I just try to run past them as fast as I can and just keep moving on. When you make it up to the top floor here, you want to hit the button in the lower right corner, then charge through the next 2 rooms, well, they're really kind of one big room, and then when you actually enter the next door, you'll see a crack in the floor with a light shining on it. Get out your bombs and then throw one onto that crack, and you can also pick up some extra bombs in the upper left corner, and you will see that the hole will open up and the shine light going through it. And this is key because this is what we need in order to actually get to the boss in just a little while. Now head back down the staircase and go through into the next room, and when you make it in here, instead of heading all the way back down like we did or came from, you want to now go over to the right since we were able to get rid of that blue switch. Watch out for the 2 red Zazaks as well as the Gibbo, and then go into the next room with a staircase leading downwards. Once down here, take out the red Zazak that's going to get in your way, then pick up the big giant block and throw it to the side. Here, you're going to head over to the right and you're going to be in a dungeon-like setting. Thankfully, having the big key, you don't need a lot of little individual keys. You can just keep running into them like I am, or just walk through. Either way works. Grab the small key in the upper right and then talk to the girl here, who will tell you to take her outside. However, that's not what you're going to want to do, because she won't be able to actually join you outside once you get there, and she'll actually reset and come back here. Use the small key in order to go through the left door, use the hammer to take out the moles, and open up the big chest in order to get the all-powerful Titan's Mitt. Now you can pick up the heaviest rocks in the game. Once here, just go back to the right and head upwards. You can head up if you want, and there's a room over to the left, but it's just a dead end, and there's no purpose in going into that room. And the right path up there, well, leads to this room just from that locked door over on the left here. Once back up onto this floor, take out all the enemies in the room. Defeat the enemies in your way, but what you really want to do is hit the button in the upper right corner, and that'll take you back to this room. Enter into the door up top, and now it's time for the boss fight. Yep. The girl that you ended up rescuing from the dungeon ends up being Blind, the thief. Well, Blind is one of the coolest bosses as well. This Blind and the Helmasaur King are easily my favorites. For Blind, after you attack her several times, her body will actually fall apart, and the head will start rotating around the room exorcist style, spitting fireballs all around. Having the secondary shield is a real plus here, because it blocks a lot of the fireballs coming your way. After you destroy the second head, and that's flying around, you'll have one more head on the body to take out, and once that's gone, you finally have defeated Blind, and you can move on to the next areas. Blind's also probably one of the toughest, and doing it relatively early on can definitely be a challenge, and that's one of the benefits I like of actually doing the Thieves Town dungeon relatively early on in the game. After completing the dungeon here in the Thieves Town, we will be doing a couple other things before heading into the next dungeon, which is located in the actual Dark Woods. Down below the town, now that we can lift up these rocks, we're going to meet up with this frog. Well, the frog actually ends up being one of the blacksmith brothers, and he can actually help upgrade our sword. So what we're going to do is go up here and go to the right, and you're going to find this destroyed house. However, in the light world, it's actually the blacksmith house. Before going into the smith's house, though, we're going to destroy every one of these little posts that are sticking up. Yep, it does take a little bit, but you're going to get a heart piece for doing so, so it's well worth destroying them all. I also love that the cuckoos in the Dark World are just kind of skeletons. It's kind of a weird, creepy thing, and they still react just like the ones from the Light World. Link to the Past was also the first game with the cuckoos that you can actually keep hitting them to the point where they get really mad and they just start storming the screen, flying from every which direction, trying to take out Link and kill him. When we go back to the Light World, we're going to go inside and drop the blacksmith off at his house. They're going to both be happy that they're reunited, but they're just going to stand there for a second. So what you want to do is you want to leave and then go right back in and then talk to the blacksmith. They will offer to actually temper your sword. Thankfully, it only costs 10 rupees, and it's a big upgrade to your sword, but it takes a little bit. So what you have to do is you'll have to go over a couple of screens and then come back. But what we're going to do first, though, is knock over this post to the right and drop down into this hole. Now, this is kind of a weird, giant thing that we're going to find in here, but if you sprinkle it with the magic powder, you actually get a new magic meter. Well, this guy actually supposedly curses you, and now your magic meter takes half the amount of magic needed in order to use things that use magic. After exiting out of the cave, we now have to go over a couple of screens in order to get the sword fully tempered. I'm not sure if it's only one screen, but I'm pretty sure you have to go 2 screens away and then come back, and that will actually allow the sword to be fully ready. So once we've done that, we're going to go back into the blacksmith's house and talk to them, and now we'll have the red tempered sword, the level 3 sword in the game. This does about half as much more damage as the last sword, and definitely will help beat and defeat some of the later bosses and enemies even easier now. Head back into the Dark World and then go up here and you'll find a treasure chest that's locked and you won't be able to open it. Once you've done so, use the magic mirror to go back into the Light World once again and then get out the flute. Then we're going to be heading over to the location of where the Swamp Palace is in the Dark World. That gate that allows you to actually lower the water, aka number 7 on our map. From here, we're going to be heading over to the left, and there's actually a thief over here who won't say anything until you actually talk to him with the treasure chest, and you kind of like blackmail him a little bit into helping you with the chest, since you'll tell him that you won't tell anybody else who he is, and he'll open up the chest and give you the magic bottle. Then use the flute once again, and return to Kakariko. I know, a lot of going back and forth here, but we're actually getting a decent amount done by doing so. We're now going to head up into the Dark Woods itself and complete the technically 3rd dungeon of the Dark World. The 3rd dungeon is very unorthodox. It's actually broken up into multiple different parts spread along the Dark Woods. The path that I'm going to be taking is the quickest and most direct route in order to get here, and I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a trick, which is a little bit difficult if you're first trying it, but honestly it's one of the easiest skips to do in the game. Overall, the Skull Woods is probably one of the most fascinating dungeons because of all the splits and all. We're going to be starting off by ignoring the first open skull mouth and heading north, and then going into this one. Once inside here, you're going to have some Gibdos that are going to get in your way, and you're also going to be introduced to the Wall Masters. These guys have been prevalent in the original Zelda and other Zeldas going forward, and they warp you back to the beginning of a dungeon, and of course, by that, it's extremely annoying. What you're going to have to do is push and pull the statue up through the center in order to land on the button, so that you can then go through the door just above. In the next room, just walk yourself around and open up the chest in order to find the big key. Then, just use the magic mirror, and you'll be right back at the entrance and exit out. Now, we're going to head over to the upper path and over to the right and down. And now, there's a secret path you can take inside of the flowers, but we're going to get to the big chest even easier. And this is how we're going to do it. When you're in this room, you can see it, but you won't be able to walk directly to it. So what you want to do is you want to place a bomb right here. Then you can run into the wall to make sure that you're as close to the wall as possible, and when that bomb hits you, when you time it right, you just fly right across the pit, allowing you easy access to the giant chest, and allowing you to get the fire rod without really having to go through a lot of other rooms. I know, it's a shortcut, and some people probably aren't going to like that, but I find that trick really fun to do, and definitely makes some of the monotony of just really falling down into the pit through that hidden thing in the flowers, going to the left, and having to pull a giant switch to blow open a wall, which in case you can go through. Now, we're heading back to this area where we got the key. Be sure to grab the small key located in the upper left corner from the skull. Then, work your way up here and use the fire rod that we just got from the big chest and burn down this giant protrusion from this weird creature's mouth. Then you'll be able to enter inside the dungeon. Head straight up, and since you have a small key with you, you can instantly unlock the door. If you don't have a key, and you want to get the key that's located in here, you'll have to go down those stairs and work your way around a little bit of a maze. But this allows you to get past a lot easier. Hit all the star buttons in the correct order so that you can actually make it through, and in the next room you'll have a bunch of Gibdos, which are easily defeated with fire. And the good thing about Gibdos and destroying them with fire, they have a good chance of actually dropping magic. Then you're going to have to light all the torches using the fire rod. And next room, ignore the enemies and just slice open the vines to the north and go through. Now in this room you'll have to take out the Gibdo in order to get the key, but the easiest way to do that is just taking out some of the other enemies first. In the next room, just pick up one of the skulls and then drop down the hole, and it's time to fight Mothula, the boss for dungeon number 3. Now the fire rod really helps out and does a decent amount to Mothula, as you'll be able to use this to do a decent damage and try to run around the room avoiding all the spikes that are flying at you, as well as his projectiles. This can be really tough, and when you run out of fire, you're going to then have to use your sword in order to help you out. And with the tempered sword, we can definitely do a lot of damage and beat this fight a lot quicker. Once he's taken care of, you want to grab that big heart and the next diamond, and we'll be heading to the next dungeon.